This is a story about a fairy who decided to stop being one. At the very edge of an ancient forest, where a small hidden marsh stretches quietly between roots and shadows, there stands an old oak tree. Its branches spread wide, holding the sunlight, as if the rays themselves got lost there long ago. And beneath those branches lives a small lizard named Feya. At first glance, she seems completely ordinary. But almost no one knows the truth. Feya is a real fairy. She's simply taking a little break from magic. Once, she soared above wide, silent lakes. She shimmered like a drop of dew on a spider's web, creating quiet miracles and shaping entire worlds with ease. But one day, a thought found her. What would it feel like to live inside a world I created? So she drifted down onto a soft, mossy mound, turned herself into a lizard, and said, "That's it. Time to rest. Let the miracles happen for me now. I want to see. I want to feel." And she stayed. Since then, she has lived beneath the old oak, listening to the quiet rhythm of rain, breathing in the scent of warm, damp moss, watching dragonflies skim the water while frogs chase each other in endless, playful circles. And the world keeps moving beautifully, without her. But sometimes it feels like something is missing, something she can't name yet. The moss is soft, the water is warm, even the mosquitoes are not too bold. Feya squints at the sunlight and smiles. How wonderful. No need to rush. No need to save anyone. No need to shine. I can just be. She lies still, breathing slowly, listening as life hums all around her. Birds argue about the weather. Frogs seem to debate something eternal. And the water lilies, as always, whisper about fashion. And Feya is both the quiet watcher of this marsh and the storyteller of its gentle tales. Gentle stories, light and a little playful. Stories without pain, without sharp edges. Stories where villains are not truly evil, just a little tired and maybe misunderstood. Stories where love smells like warm cherry pie, not like heartbreak. When Feya speaks, the darkness softens. Worries drift away. Even the mosquitoes grow quiet just to listen. Sometimes she forgets. She catches stray thoughts wandering through the air and for a moment believes they are her own. And for a second, her heart feels heavy. But then, wait, I'm a fairy. And the heaviness fades like morning mist under the first light. She stretches her invisible wings and smiles. I'll stay here. I'll watch. I'll feel. And I'll tell stories. And the marsh breathes out softly. Its fairy is here again. And when Feya smiled, that's when everything truly began. The marsh awakened. And from that moment on, every day began telling a new story. And this is one of them. This morning, the marsh was unusually restless. A visitor had arrived from the city. A toad. She came with a suitcase, a laptop, and a lecture on successful self-development. She announced that she would no longer simply croak. From now on, she was a personal growth coach. The marsh fell quiet. Even the dragonflies paused midair. "You need to think positively," the toad said, adjusting her glasses. "Positivity attracts flies. And success. Just look at me. I've become version 2.0 of myself." The lizard, like everyone else, listened politely, silent, nodding along with her words. The toad spoke for a long time, about goals, about comfort zones, about the inner critic. Then she took out her phone, snapped a photo beside a water lily, and added a caption. "Live life to the fullest. even if you're up to your neck in the marsh. Feya smiled. Once, she had known a small toad who was curious about everything. She marveled at the world and turned it into little songs. About a spider drifting above her home on a thin thread of silk. About a fly carefully washing its tiny feet. About a cat from a nearby village sitting by the lake, calling to a heron just to share the latest news. That little toad had been the happiest creature in the world. But then she grew up. She left for the city and slowly forgot how freely she had once lived, how easily she had found joy in each day. She began taking courses, searching for her purpose. And now, waving her phone in the air, she was trying to explain happiness to the marsh, forgetting that once she had simply breathed it. Feya inhaled the quiet of the forest and whispered, "Sometimes silence is the best compliment, and perhaps the most honest one." The water beneath the moss rippled softly. When the toad left, returning to the city to write a course about harmony, the air hummed for a long while. The wind moved through the reeds, gently erasing the traces of her loud words, and the marsh became itself again, alive, warm, and real. Somewhere in the city, under a photo of a water lily, the first likes were already appearing. After the toad's visit, Feya the lizard began to notice just how many stray thoughts kept appearing in her mind. She decided it was time to clear her mind. That's it, she told herself. No thoughts. Complete calm. She sat in a lotus position on a warm, mossy mound, straightened her back, took a deep breath, and began not to think. The first thought arrived immediately. My tail is too long. It's getting in the way. This is uncomfortable. Feya blinked and tried to push the thought away. And instantly, another thought slipped in. I'm thinking about how I'm thinking about my tail being in the way. Then another thought followed. Frogs don't have tails. It must be much easier for them to sit like this. And then another. Maybe it's time for a snack? The dragonfly brought delicious cookies today. And her new boots are absolutely lovely. After a few minutes, a whole swarm of thoughts swirled around Feya. About mosquitoes, about mint tea, about whether she might be a little too old to be meditating by the edge of the marsh. The thoughts giggled, tickled her from within, and refused to leave. Feya kept going until midday. Then she gave up. All right then, she said. Let the thoughts come. I'll welcome them. I'll offer them cookies. Let them sit quietly and drink tea. She brewed some tea with mint and chamomile, sat at the edge of her mound, and waited for the thoughts to come, watching raindrops draw soft patterns on the water. But her mind grew very quiet, and that's when Feya understood. Thoughts don't like being expected. They get bored and leave. Silence opened a new world. Feya began to notice that dreams were drifting into the marsh. They didn't ask, they didn't knock. They simply fell, like leaves, onto the water. Feya listened to their whispers and grew quiet. This is it, my destiny. This is my purpose. One dream promised a great journey. Another, fame, admiration, a life full of shining moments. And a third, a great love, the kind that makes your head spin and takes your breath away. Feya almost believed them. She had already chosen an outfit, imagined herself giving an interview, even rehearsed what she would say when confessing her love. But then she noticed something strange. In all of those dreams, there were no marsh frogs, no rain, no oak tree, no moss, and without them, the world felt unreal. She lifted her eyes to the sky and saw the wind carrying dreams across the marsh, just like lost letters. Some were new, some were forgotten, some were dusty and fragile, some were blurred with tears, some were bright with hope. And each one had someone else's name on it. They had simply lost their way. Feya gently gathered the dreams and set them free into the wind. Let them return to where they belong. And for herself, she kept only one. The one where she simply sits on her mossy mound, drinks tea, and listens as the rain tells its quiet stories. Not everything that enters your mind is meant for you. Sometimes, it is only the wind carrying someone else's dreams right past your life. After a day filled with dreams and the whisper of rain, the marsh was unusually quiet. Even the mosquitoes seemed to have taken the day off. They lay lazily among the reeds, enjoying the peace. Feya stretched out on her mossy mound, warming herself beneath the shy afternoon sun. A few more moments, and sleep would have quietly conquered her thoughts about the meaning of life. But then, right beside her ear, a determined, buzzing voice broke the silence. "Get up! Do something! Move! The forest won't wait!" Feya reluctantly opened one eye. A fly hovered in front of her, bright, energetic, wearing tiny glasses, buzzing with the energy of a strong morning coffee. "And who are you?" Feya asked. "I'm the motivation fly," the fly declared proudly. "I inspire, I energize, I help everyone become better. You're lying here when you could be flying, starting a business, finding your purpose." "I'm already quite happy," Feya replied calmly. "I have the sun, the oak tree, and my mossy mound. That's enough for me." But of course the fly refused to give up. "Excuses," she buzzed sharply. "Where are your goals? Where's your plan? Where's your personal growth?" Feya sighed. At first, she tried to ignore her. She assumed it would pass. It didn't. Eventually, she even began to feel a little sorry for the fly. So much enthusiasm, and about as much use as an umbrella in a storm. "All right," Feya finally said. "If you're so active, tell me, what have you actually achieved? Have you built a house? Learned the language of Brazilian flies? Opened self-improvement courses for mosquitoes?" The fly hesitated. She blushed, as much as a fly can blush, and quietly admitted, "No, but I have so much energy. I feel ready to share it with everyone. I just don't know where to begin." Feya smiled gently. "Then here's your plan. Step 1, find a quiet place, perhaps inside a water lily. Step 2, sit still and listen to how the marsh breathes, how the wind moves through the reeds. Step 3, catch a moment of silence and stay there for at least 10 minutes. Just be. And if after that you still feel like helping someone, then help." The fly wrote everything down in a tiny notebook, nodded seriously, and flew away, as she put it herself, to implement the strategy. When she finally disappeared into the reeds, the old oak tree rustled its leaves in quiet approval. Since then, she has been running workshops for mosquitoes, giving lectures on work-flight balance, and hosting a podcast called Buzz with Purpose. And as for Feya, at last she sleeps peacefully again. Without advice, without slogans, without without the constant background noise that somehow always sounds a little like guilt. But the peace did not last long. Somewhere nearby, someone was already making a weekly plan. Early that morning, the snail woke up with a deep sense of importance. The day before, she had been deeply inspired by the motivation fly. "That's it," she told herself sternly. "No more crawling through life without a purpose. It's time to change." She pulled out a notebook she had carefully made from water lily leaves, sharpened a reed like a pencil, and began to write. 7 o'clock. Begin moving. 7:15. Take a breath. 7:16. Exhale. 7:30. Crawl 2 centimeters. 8 o'clock. Feel proud of yourself. The snail crawled diligently forward, frowning with concentration and checking off each task. Everything was going perfectly, though, admittedly, it was exhausting. Until suddenly she noticed a drop of dew resting in her path, catching all the colors of the morning. The snail stopped. This was not part of the plan. It was inefficient. And yet, the dew was so beautiful. She looked into it and, for the first time in a long while, smiled. Then a breeze passed through the marsh. The notebook slipped into the water. The ink dissolved. Every goal she had written sank beneath the reflections of the clouds. "It's all ruined," the snail whispered. Nearby, Feya the lizard moved a little closer. She had been watching everything with quiet curiosity. "All ruined?" Feya asked gently. "To me, it looks like something has just been found." "You were happy." And the snail realized that it was true. Life was never really inside the lists. It was there, inside the drop of dew, inside the stillness of the marsh, inside the simple possibility of stopping for a moment. Suddenly, she felt an urge to sketch the dewdrop and the flight of the mosquito that had been buzzing nearby the entire time. She gathered fresh leaves, made herself a new notebook, and began to draw. Later, the snail settled beside Feya on the mossy mound, closed her eyes, and allowed herself to dream. And while the snail was learning how to breathe without a schedule, on the other side of the marsh, a frog had already discovered an entirely new way to become famous. One day, the frog looked into the still surface of the water and thought her reflection looked particularly good. "This should be shared," she decided. "The whole world should see how beautifully I jump." And so, her account appeared on Marshgram. Every morning brought a new post, a selfie on a lily pad, #morningleap, a slow-motion jump video, a challenge called "Catch a Mosquito on the First Try." At first, it was fun. The mosquitoes laughed. The butterflies left little hearts. Even the old heron commented once, "Young people are so talented these days." But little by little, something began to change. The frog no longer jumped simply because she wanted to. Every jump now required the perfect light, the perfect angle, the perfect caption, and the right hashtags. The lightness disappeared. All that remained was a schedule, a constant chase for the perfect shot, and a quiet feeling that something important was slipping away. "One more take," she muttered while the sun disappeared behind the treetops. That jump wasn't inspiring enough. One evening, the frog opened her profile and suddenly didn't recognize herself. There were jumps, poses, filters, but not a single real smile. She sighed and looked around. The marsh was still living its life. The cicadas sang without a live stream. The wind moved through the leaves without filters, and the reflection of the moon in the dark water was so perfect that even the thought of a like felt almost disrespectful. And Feya the lizard was smiling too, not for a camera, just because. The frog closed her eyes and pressed delete account. Then she stepped to the edge of the lily pad, pushed herself forward, and jumped. No camera, no audience, no reason. Simply because she could. And in that moment, mid-air above the marsh, she felt something she had almost forgotten. The thrill in her stomach, the wind rushing past her ears. There it was, a real like from life itself. When the frog first jumped, simply for the joy of it, the wind carried her laughter across the marsh. And eventually it reached the reeds growing at the very edge of the water. They stood tall and proud, and each one believed it was special. What upset them most was that no one seemed to notice them individually. "Look how tall I am! I'm clearly the best," one reed boasted to Feya. "And I'm the straightest," another quickly replied. "My wrestling is softer than anyone else's," added the youngest reed. The sun watched quietly from above, its light shimmering across the water, while the marsh gently swayed beneath their endless arguments. From morning until evening, they compared themselves to one another, until one day the wind arrived. It slipped between the reeds, and suddenly each one began to sound different. One hummed like a bumblebee inside an empty shell. Another rang softly like a delicately tuned string, and the youngest rustled shyly, like silk moving in the dark. Together, they wove a melody so beautiful that every argument suddenly felt unimportant. It made you want to stand completely still and listen forever. Feya noticed this too. "Yes, you are all different," she said softly, "but together, you become something beautifully harmonious." The reeds fell silent. Their proud voices faded, and in the quiet that followed, they heard one another for the very first time, not as rivals, but as notes within the same melody. And there, swaying gently in the wind, they became one beautiful whole. From that day on, the reeds welcomed every returning wind, because each time it arrived, it gave them a new way to sing together.